various army outfits in Siachen as well as in Sikkim, in the Chinese borders. But more importantly, I had a closer look at China when I headed the China desk. We have a Apex Defense Intelligence Agency in Delhi. I headed the China desk of that Defense Intelligence Agency as a brigadier. And I was part of the focus group China, which is part of the National Security Council. So every month we used to meet once, where the research and analysis wing director, the director from Intelligence Bureau, the Joint Secretary East, who used to look after China, and part of the national security establishment used to sit together and take stock of what's happening. I'm talking from 2012 to 14 because they were very, these were very critical years if you look back, because 2012, the current leader, Xi Jinping, took over. And there was a very drastic change in the way the the China conducted its foreign policy. So there were crucial years. A lot of transformation took place during that time. I was heading that China desk. So there was a lot of insight I gained from interacting with not only the current lot of, that time current lot of people who manned the highest positions in the government, but also some of the retired foreign secretaries who used to be, earlier ambassadors in China, to get an insight into what was happening in the 70s and 60s. So I understand a lot of you will have questions on the Indo-China relations and how India looks at how we as a country, whether we can withstand China and things like that. But let me give you a brief overview first so that we get everybody on the same key. I'll talk a bit about, you can't talk about China without talking about the geoeconomics. The larger gamut is the economics. It is after all the money which matters. If US is the most powerful nation, it is the, sole superpower since 1989. It is because it's also the largest economy in the world. And that's something which, a position it gained after World War II. Before which, of course, Britain dominated the global economy for almost 2 centuries. And alongside other colonial powers like France and the Dutch and the Spanish and the Belgian, who also had significant colonial holdings. So economics matter, and we must look at everything with a economic backdrop. After all, your firepower or your ability to modernize your armed forces, your ability to sustain a war, should you enter a war, all depends on how much money you have. In that sense, between India and China, broad comparison is that the GDP of China is roughly 6 times this GDP of India. We are a 3 trillion economy. China has a GDP of about 18 trillion. A trillion is 1,000 billion. 1,000 billion is, each billion is 1,000 million, and a million is 8 crores. So you can do the arithmetic, the mathematics and figures and kind of comprehend. So because it has a economy which is about 6 times, it has more money to spare. And this spare money can go into various things, including military. So its defense budget is around 400 billion annual compared to about 70 billion of India. So again, about 6 times. So it spends more money on its defense than we can ever think of. We have other priorities. We have our, 850 million people, 85 crores are dependent on rations. provided by the government. So we have a lot of other priorities, and our money must definitely go into them rather than into just modernizing the military. But the point to note is that economic matters in geopolitical relations, and therefore our aspirations and our international diplomacy rests on how powerful we are as an economy. That said, today China looks at the world as a rival to US rather than seeing from a Indo-China perspective. It is not a competitor with India. We may be the fifth largest economy, and possibly next 2-3 years will become the third largest economy. It still won't matter, alter the situation very much, because to become the third largest economy, you have to overtake France and Germany. Germany and Japan, which are in the region of 3.4, 3.7 trillion. So possibly by 2027, 2028, I'm only talking about the formal economy. Informally, possibly we are larger than them, because more than 50% of our economy is black economy. So I'm not counting that. I'm talking about the formal part. So we may become the third largest economy, but we are not competing with the second largest economy. Nowhere near. I mean, our per capita, our GDP is about 2,700, our income, $2,700 per annual. Whereas of China, it is about 12,700. So again, because our population is almost similar. So per capita income, the overall GDP is 6 times. Defense spending is 6 times, about 400 billion. The US, of course, outstrips everybody in the world. I think it outstrips the combined expenditure of the next 10 odd militaries in the world. The US spends about $870 billion annually on defense. So, but China takes itself as a competitor with US, and US since at least 2006 considers China as its primary adversary and not Russia. From 1945 to the end of the Second World War to 1989. So that 45 years, it was a Cold War period where it was the Soviet versus the United States, the NATO versus the Warsaw Pact. 89, the Berlin Wall fell, and firstly the East European countries, the communist governments were overthrown, and then of course the USSR itself broke up by 1991 into 16 different republics like Ukraine, Georgia, and all these countries, which are independent countries now. But still, Russia versus US was the chapter going for the next about 20 years, 15 years, maybe 20 years. But 2008 economic crisis, you had a global recession in the world, and that changed a lot. Because 2008 economic crisis, why I'm time and again referring to economy, because everything, after all, your prowess, military prowess, is dependent on how much mullah you have at home. So the 2008 economic crisis was a turning point as far as China is concerned. Because that was the time it had already built up a huge trade surplus, and it had a reserve of almost $3 trillion. And it was able to pump in about 600 billion to stabilize its own economy and gain ascendancy in terms of global trade. Militarily, in terms of sheer force to force, let's say, everybody is keen on knowing what exactly, where we stand as terms of in terms of force ratios. Manpower wise, we can compare. We are about a 1.4 million. Their former army is about 95 lakhs. Because they have downsized. They had a 3 million PLA, People's Liberation Army, which was peasant army. They used to mostly cultivate the whatever commune farms they had. In China, nobody owns land other than the state. Even today, the entire landmass of China is owned by the CPC, the Communist Party of China, which owns the state, and the state owns the land. So most of them were peasants. Means they were not given very the regular salaries and all, but they would be trained and they could fight. So from 3 million strong army, it has downsized to 1 million. Ours is about 1.4 million, but it is not man to man. In terms of modernization, I'll say that China has a 20 years advantage. Again, referring back to economy, 1978 is when Chinese economy took off. And then for the next 3 decades, it is growing at an annual rate of almost 9 to 10%. Uninterrupted. It is unmatched in the history of global economy. Absolutely. From 1978, when Deng, famously said that to be rich is glorious. Deng Xiaoping. I mean, most people would have been born much later than when Deng died in 97. But he was the man who transformed China from the country of communes and poverty to what it is today. In fact, in China's entire history, starting from 1949 when it became a People's Republic of China, to today, they normally consider 3 eras. One is the Mao Zedong era, Mao's era, which went on till 76. You had the Cultural Revolution and all those things. But it was a poor country. Interestingly, in 1978, I'll just because I am talking about Deng and how he reformed China, from 78 onwards. And India started its actual reforms, though 91, the financial crisis made us to open up our economy. The economy started taking off around 98 under Bajpayee's government. In fact, in 2004, the slogan was, if any country is shining, it must be India. The election in which the ruling party lost in 2004. But 98, so 78 was the Chinese takeoff and 98 was the India's takeoff. So we have a 20 years gap. It is not easy to catch up. It's not difficult. I mean, it's not insurmountable, but it is not easy. So from 78, when Deng came in, he reformed, he opened up. A lot of American industry got relocated to China. And that is how the China was able to absorb a lot of technology and therefore able to later on modernize its armed forces. I'll leave it at that. Coming to the Indo-China dispute. When we got independence in 1947, China was still in I would say, state of transition. The People's Republic of China got established in 1949. China was not a neighbor of India. When we got independence, China was not our neighbor. Our neighbor was Tibet. Dalai Lama from Lhasa ruled Tibet. Tibet at different points of time has been considered as semi-autonomous or autonomous or whatever. But China was not our neighbor. So when India got independence and consolidated its territory, there were 500 odd princely states and they got so I mean, we must remember that our border dispute does not have a historical thing before that. It is only when China, gobbled up Tibet that China became our neighbor. Now there are some historical fault lines. If you go into the Geological Survey of India map of GSI map of 1950, you will find that both the Aksai Chin area as well as the NEFA, that time Northeast Frontier Agency, Arunachal Pradesh as a state came much later. Firstly, it was called as NIFA, Northeast Frontier Agency. Both are dotted lines, means they were to be demarcated. The Northeast Frontier Agency, the NIFA, Arunachal Belt, which is about 1100 kilometers of our line of actual control, that is roughly the McMahon line. People must have heard about the McMahon line, and that we sometimes keep hearing that China must respect the McMahon line and all that. Now, the McMahon line was based on Shimla Agreement of 1913. India was not independent, remember. It was between British, Tibet, and China. 3 parties were involved. But China never signed that document, firstly. China never signed the Shimla Agreement of 1930. The Tibet representative signed. So the McMahon line is a line drawn by the then Surveyor General McMahon, famously with a very bold ink pen, which on ground is about I think stretches of between 13 to 16 kilometers. So the border was not demarcated, but it was generally aligned that this is the McMahon line. China was not a party to it, but our claim to the inviolability of McMahon line was based on the fact that the British never considered that Tibet was under China's occupation or Tibet was a state under China's occupation. In fact, if you go back a little more, 1907, the Chinese were thrown out, Chinese soldiers or whatever representative they had in Lhasa were attacked and chased out of Tibet. And they, in fact, actually came down through Sikkim and transited and through India. And in fact, we sheltered. You have a Chinatown in Calcutta. Now, these are descendants of the people who escaped from Tibet in 1907. So, by what I'm trying to say is that it is only when Tibet was gobbled up by China, overrun by China, and before that, after that, the Dalai Lama escaped to India in 1959, that we had a border problem. We were face to face. China became a neighbor. Now, 1952, we demarcated our borders into solid line. Means we made as a patriot, I should not say that, but I can say that we made a cartographic invasion, in the sense that a border which we did not know that it actually belongs to us, because we left it as dotted lines to be demarcated later. When you demarcate borders, you have to negotiate with the other side. So we neither settled it with Tibet when we did it in 1952, nor we settled with China thereafter when China gobbled up Tibet. So our boundary dispute has a genesis which looked from India's view can be vastly different from how China views it. That's one. So when we depict China as an enemy, our enemy number one, we must be cautious actually. Is it an enemy? It is an adversary. It's a competitor. It's a challenger. And yet, China is our second largest or I think third largest trading partner. No, the India-China trade last year was something in the region of 117 billion, which it crossed the Indo-US trade. Our largest trading partner is EU, and the second largest trading partner is the ASEAN, the neighborhood. But the third largest is Indo-China trade. So it's our largest trading partner, third largest trading partner. Yet it's our adversary. It's not an enemy in that sense, because the border dispute must be seen dispassionately. There are mistakes. I'm taking you back in time because we can be very nationalistic and patriotic and say we must throw China out. It won't happen, and it should not happen that way, because there are views which differ, and there are views which can be even proven legally, because we claim our territories based on being the successor state to British India. No, India in the map that we see today never existed like that. It was hundreds of princely states. So we, as inheritor of the British Empire, we forced our borders, we formed our borders, we demarcated our borders. But even in 1950, the Geological Survey of India map, we left those dotted lines because they were to be negotiated, they had to be settled. But without settling means talking to our neighbor, we in 1952 we made it bold lines. So we said this is ours. The dispute remained. China very sincerely tried to settle the borders. During Chow En-lai's visits to India in 1961, just before the war, 1962 also he visited India. The war took place in October. He visited, I think, sometimes in June. He offered that NEFA, the Northeast Frontier Agency, they will recognize the McMahon line. You leave the Aksai Chin to us. Why Aksai Chin is important to China is because that links Tibet with another difficult region, which is the Xinjiang region, which is mostly Muslims. You know, Xinjiang is actually, another interesting fact is that Xinjiang actually was a Soviet republic. The Xinjiang region, which is to the north, which borders our Aksai Chin, was a Soviet republic established in 1931. It was gifted to People's Republic of China in 1949. But anyway, to connect Xinjiang with the mainland through Lhasa to Kasgar, this Western highway, it passes through the Aksai Chin area. Aksai Chin area have served in Siachen 2 tenures flying there. It's absolutely barren, 16,000-17,000 is the general altitude, 12 to 16,000. Flat, devoid of any settlement or devoid of any vegetation. The king of, if you go back in further in history, the king of Kashmir only once established an outpost there. So our claim to that Aksai Chin area is a debatable issue. China tried to settle it in 1962. Even much later in 1988, when Deng came, visited India, and that time Prime Minister was late Rajiv Gandhi. Even that time also he offered. Remember in 78, India and China GDP were equal, almost 273 billion. So from being equals, and therefore when we could have negotiated our border disputes as equals, we did not negotiate, and today we are unequals. And the world functions on a hierarchical asymmetry. I mean, a country which is 6 times our economy, therefore can spend 6 times more on defense. Now, the negotiations have taken a backstage for obvious reasons. 1978, they were 273 billion, we are 273 billion. They were just exceeding by, I think, 50 million or whatever, the GDP I'm talking about. So 1988, when Deng visited India, he offered Rajiv Gandhi. These things I am telling out of authentic sources, spoken to by then foreign secretaries whom I happened to meet in Delhi while in the Defense Intelligence Agency in some of the roundtables that we used to have. So they offered to negotiate. It didn't happen. I mean, India refused. There was no political will to, because we have a map, the Bharat Mata's map with the Aksai Chin and the POK also included. There is no, firstly, the general population as well, that includes the political class, do not have a comprehensive view of this. What exactly is it? You know, a lot of times in parliament you will hear that we will not forsake the sacrifices made by our forefathers, will not give up an inch of land, you know, those kind of things. But remember, that was never part of our, you know, under occupation of even the king of Kashmir. Kashmir itself came to us in 1948. So my point is that China very sincerely offered in 1988 Deng to say that we will recognize NIFA as your territory, and you give this portion, which is about 38,000 square kilometers, Aksai Chin, out of which China presently occupies almost 36,500 square kilometers. And if you take the Saxgam Valley, which is to the north, which has been ceded by Pakistan to China, which is about 5,000 square kilometers. So that's how sometimes they say China is under occupation of 41,000 square kilometers of Indian territory. That's the fact that people must know. Okay. I would also say why I'm saying that China is sincere, because in 1967, I think, when Pakistan, 1963 maybe, when Pakistan ceded this 5,000 square kilometers to China, in the agreement, the Chinese insisted to say that this is subject to the final settlement of the state of Kashmir. Means they said that this is under dispute. The Kashmir, the border, the Aksai Chin border is under dispute, and still a final settlement, this 5,300 or square kilometers, 5,600 square kilometers, we are taking from Pakistan. But we have a dispute and that needs to be settled. So I'm saying that they made a dispute resolution one of the cornerstones of their foreign policy till very late. But then the economy took off. I'm talking about 98, 78, their economy took off. And today, where it is today. The big change happened in 2008. As I said, the economic crisis happened. We had a 62 war. We lost badly. But remember in 62, I'm not going to the details of the 62 war, but they came down right up to Tezpur. Means they overran almost the entire, from Tawang side, they came down to Tezpur. But they went back. That means even in 62, it is proven beyond doubt that they still respected the McMahon line. They recognized that this territory should rightfully belong to India. There is another factor I will put into your mind, because your young minds, you will, what I say, possibly some of it will stay for a long time or give an impression which is different from what you people have heard so far. That earlier you didn't have demarcated borders. You had frontiers. Means a king, had a frontier village. The other king had another village. But the common area between them, anybody could go and graze and all that. There was no issues. Similarly, the claim was based on the, you had Rajas and you had Maharajas, kings and emperors. How an emperor established its empire? Kings, annually will pay something to the emperor. He used to send those gifts or money or whatever, agreed amount or gifted amount, voluntary amount to the emperor. Annually, some people will go, very important person will go and gift it, saying that I am under your protection or Chhatra Chhaya mein. The monastery in Tawang, Arunachal, the monastery in Tawang, as well as the monastery in Leh, they used to pay annual gifts to Dalai Lama. And these are, Tibet, these are Buddhist areas. They used to pay their gifts to Dalai Lama. So you take your mind. So who owned or who had a right to Tibet, to Tawang, as well as to Leh in those times? You can say Dalai Lama can claim it, because these monasteries were paying their annual tribute to the Dalai Lama in Lhasa. Call it religious only, but it was there. So, as I said, the economic crisis of 2008 made a turning point. The China became more assertive. 2012, Xi Jinping took over. He made a drastic change in the foreign policy, because by that time, China had gained massive economic clout. It had become the manufacturing hub of the world. It had become huge export-oriented country, and it built up tremendous amount of surplus. It started modernizing its army actually after the Gulf War, 1991. Because Gulf War was a first, you can say, TV war, televised war, when US attacked Iraq, evicted Iraq from Kuwait, first Gulf War. So there are a lot of technology demonstration because of that, China got inspired, it started modernizing. The second thing happened after 9/11, when the next war happened. I mean, the US invaded Afghanistan and Iraq 2001, 2003. After the war, US found that the then organization of the armed forces into divisions, corps, and all that thing is not a very viable thing in terms of fighting. They made brigade combat groups, BCTs. So the US started modernizing from 2005 to 2008. Russia converted its divisions and corps into brigades size forces from 2008 to 2012. 2008 to 2012, remember, Vladimir Putin was not the president. He respected the two-term limitation then, because he was part of the, remember, he was part of the G7 group, he was G8. This US with the West. The Western concept was 2 terms. The American president can only stay for 2 terms and then he doesn't fight a 3rd term. That is the unwritten tradition. Similarly, Putin also, after having served 2 terms from 2002 to 2008, 4-year terms, he became prime minister and Medvedev became the president. So this 4 years, he had a lot of time. He didn't have to, stand in line for protocol, receive presidents, see of presidents, go for negotiations. So he devoted to reforming the armed forces of Russia, and he made brigade combat size forces now. From 2012 to 2016, China followed. That was the time I was the Defense Intelligence Agency, so we kept, minute-to-minute track of what was happening there. They converted to brigade combat forces. They modernized rapidly under Xi Jinping. Since then, China has followed a very militant foreign policy. And now that the equations have changed from 1978, when we were equal economies, to unequal economies, and China doesn't even consider itself as much in terms of BRICS also. It is a member of the BRICS, but it dominates the BRICS now. Earlier it was equal member. When prior to 2008, when the BRIC was not a formal association to begin with. It was a term which was used by some economists. That these are the emerging economies of the world. But now it is different. It doesn't consider it as committed to BRICS goals and all. No, it commits itself versus the United States. It's a challenger to the United States. So situation is very different. We had the Galwan Valley incident in June 2022, peak of COVID and all. But and we defeated. I mean, we pushed back. Soldier to soldier, we are a superior army, because remember, China adopted a one-child policy long back to control its population. A single child, I don't know how many of you in this 200 people are single children, but a single child is a spoiled child. It's pampered by their parents. You don't want to risk him. You don't want him to fight in the street. You protect him everywhere. So if you put him into the boxing arena, he's likely to lose. Okay. I mean, offense meant, I don't want to discourage, but that's a common psychology. So most of China have single children. Most of the soldiers are only child of their parents, and from 2 parents to 4 grandparents who are dependent on him. They don't want to risk him. So when it comes to soldier to soldier, we are better off. We push back. Even in 62, while China overran, very pointedly defeated India, the battles which were fought were very tough. Wherever battles were fought, wherever our troops were there, the casualties has been in the excess of 1:6. I mean, if 10 soldiers died of India, At least 6 times more soldiers died of China. So we fought valiantly, but we had strategic mistakes, intelligence failure, downsizing of the army under Nehru. He said, "We don't want an army." He had, inculcated Panchshil. So we're supposed to be friends with everybody, our neighbors and all that thing. Actually, it doesn't work in the real world, as we are discovering now. So along the way, from 78, while the swap deal, you take NEFA and give us Exciting was not accepted. In 1993, we under Narasimha Rao, we signed a border peace and tranquility agreement. 96, we had confidence building measures, and that is why when Galwan happened, our troops are not armed. Because in the border areas, I have been the chief of staff of the corps that oversees the China in the Arunachal Pradesh, and I've faced many of these situations. The border patrols on both sides are unarmed. So when it comes to face to face, it's actually physical pushback. You'll find troops pushing each other, but they don't have rifles, which is a good situation. I mean, situations don't go out of hand. They don't escalate into a war. I spoke about the military modernization. I have spoken about the trade, because we have got 120 billion. It's increasing by about 6 to 8% every year. We are dependent on China on many things. We say we are the pharmacy of the world. We manufacture the most amount of vaccines and other medicines for the entire world. But our primary ingredients, APIs, come from China. Almost like 70% of our pharmaceutical industry is dependent on the basic ingredients from China. We import something like 50,000 crores worth of the basic ingredients to make our medicine. So that is the kind of interdependency we have. China benefited from opening up. It was able to attract a lot of investment from the West, led by the US, because of which high-tech industries relocated to China. Because high-tech industries relocated to China, they were able to absorb that technology, and now they're ahead of even US in some of the areas. For example, in satellite warfare, in nanotechnology, in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in missile technology, hypersonic missile technology. They tested a hypersonic missile, the DF-17, a few years back. Supersonic. It's near impossible to detect it, the missiles. They have the DF-41 missiles which can reach anywhere in the world. In terms of space warfare, satellite technology, it's far ahead. It's that sometimes we don't recognize, because we think Galwan incident, we are able to push back means we are superior. But thing is, we are behind. It's not that India cannot do it. I mean, we have some strong points, like we have a democracy, we have our demography dividend. Our average age of India is 28. The average age of China is about 40. It's an older nation and only graying. We have more workforce than they have. As I said, 28 versus 40 is a big difference. Their average age is 40. It's an older economy. The exports are drying up. Since 2016, when Trump came to power in the US and said we must revitalize in the American industry, number of industries have relocated to other parts, not necessarily to US, but like the iPhones are now manufactured in Chennai and Bangalore. So a lot of their industries have looked to Vietnam, to Taiwan, to Philippines, to Bangladesh, and to India. So export is drying up. Internally, they have a lot of problems, in the sense that it's a one-party rule. It's a Leninist communist party rule. Its People Liberation Army is not the army of the state. It's not PRC's army. It is party's army. The army is controlled by the party. The general secretary of the party, when the boss of the party, Xi Jinping, controls he is the commander-in-chief of the People's Liberation Army. The loyalty is to the party. The party is replicated down to the brigades. They have these political commissars who are more powerful than the commanders. So they toe the party line. They have modernized rapidly. They have got two functional aircraft carriers. They have about more than 2,000 fighter aircraft, combat aircrafts, similar number of helicopters, enormous amount of drones. They have manufactured varieties of drones. And missiles is another area. They focused on missiles and navy. They downsized the army and focused on navy because Taiwan is their next target. Taiwan is their next target. And they have asserted so much on the South China Sea to consolidate. They have made many of these militarized many of these islands. They have built artificial islands, built upon existing islands to make runways and landing fields and establish military centers in various islands. They have been having regular standoffs with the navies of Philippines and others, Vietnam, who also claim if you say go into the 200 nautical mile territorial waters, so these people, all these countries will be left with nothing if they go by what China claims in the South China Sea. Taiwan, of course, remains their primary attention. Their claim on Taiwan itself is very nebulous, but I will speak about it at a later on some other occasion maybe, because it will confuse people. But their focus is on Taiwan, and so is the focus of the US on in Pacific. US has guaranteed the security of Taiwan, and therefore a lot of effort they have made. The Quad, of which India is a party along with Australia and Japan. US has also made an AUKUS with United Kingdom, Australia, and US, two military groupings. So we are in a grouping with the US against China. Have we brought some kind of guarantee in the fight against China? I doubt. Because in 71 war, US sided with Pakistan. It moved the 7th Fleet into Indian waters, and it was only the submarine which came from Russia that stalled their further movement and threat to India. So 71, US has sided with Pakistan. China, another dynamic of China I must mention here is that it has entered into our neighborhood in a big way. Pakistan, obvious, but others also. Nepal. There is a high-speed railway line from Lhasa to Sigasse, which is north of Sikkim, and there are plans to connect it to Kathmandu through a place called Dram, which is almost the border of Nepal. They will connect. So you will have a high-speed railway link to semi-high-speed railway link to Kathmandu. They have some 22 Confucian centers. They have got modernized their airports. So they have when they modernize airport, they set up radars, correct? And if they set up radars, they can monitor every flight that everybody takes off in India. In all of Odisha, Bareilly, or UP, your Hindon, Ambala, the moment your aircraft takes off, everybody radars pick up. Because they have radars in Nepal, they will say it is for civil aviation. But the radars pick up the aircraft. Like, similarly, in Bangladesh, they have modernized their navy. They have modernized their airports. In Sri Lanka, they have got the Hambantota port, where regularly service ships of China are parked, berthed there. But they have helped Sri Lanka during its fight with LTT, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. I'm going back in time all the time, but it's important to know. when the Sri Lankan government was fighting the Tamils, we did not support them because we had withdrawn in 1989 after doing our 2 years in IPKF, moved in 87, July 87. This is the the 37th year anniversary, you can say. 10th July, I think 87, we moved into Sri Lanka in the IPKF operations, and we withdrew. So because of our Tamil diaspora, we have been, you can say, neutral in the Sri Lankan fight with the LTT. LTT was, Prabhakaran was killed in 2008, 2009, April, I think. It was supported by China. China had ships berthed there in off the coast of Sri Lanka, and anytime they demanded ammunition or weapons, they would be immediately delivered. Zero loss of time. That is why it went bankrupt later on, because there is so much of Chinese debt, which they can't repay. But it went bankrupt 2 years back. But that's another thing. But the thing is that they have a solid presence in Sri Lanka. They have a solid presence in Nepal, in Maldives. Nepal has a communist army, communist government since 2008. Maldives, the present president, Moiju, is completely aligned with China. So our entire neighborhood, you can say, was surrounded by only Bangladesh. As long as Sheikh Hasina is in chair, we have good relationship. But there's a strong ISI-backed deep state within Bangladesh, which supports Chinese in their investment and all, and therefore indirectly militarily also. So that is our neighborhood environment. So what is the best case scenario today? So having given that backdrop, let me say what is the best case scenario today is to build our capability. We have a asymmetry. That asymmetry must be covered up. It can be only covered up not just because we think so, but we have to sustain it over decades. As I said, China has already, over the last, say, 40 odd years, from 78 onwards, it has peaked its rate of growth. It's now hovering around 3%, which is aligned with the general world growth. World grows, GDP grows around 3% annum. So China, from almost double-digit figures for nearly 30 years, now has come down to moderated to about 3%, 5%, 6%. Who actually don't know, because a lot of things is artificially inflated now to keep the population at bay. But they have a restricted population. There is a lot of natural calamities happening. You must have seen scenes of massive flooding and other environmental ecological disasters which are taking place. The population today is more connected to the world. They may have their Weibo, their own social media and other things, but they are not able to overcome the flow of information. So democratic or the quest for freedom by the Chinese people is something which is an unknown factor. So China may implode from within at a later point of time. To stop that, they may start a war. That can happen. If they want to start a war, will they start with Taiwan or with India? Now there are various factors. With Taiwan is solidly backed by treaty with US. Whereas India may be a member of Quad, but our support from US is tentative. US is also, I think, the largest trading partner with China. So economies, they are heavily dependent on China manufacturing. That is the fact. In the backdrop of the war in Ukraine and the now war in Gaza, there are many changing dynamics that are happening. I will only say that India is managing its external environment very, very well. It has been able to keep its toe on both, foothold on both sides. We have got extremely good relations with Russia, and we have built up very good relations with the United States also. We are backing Israel solidly in its war against Gaza. At the same time, we are able to establish good relations with Iran. We have just got a 10-year contract to manage the Chabahar port in Iran. And we have also got a contract by the Adanis to manage the the biggest port in Israel, Haifa. So just imagine, Iran and Israel are face to face, especially after the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. But India is invested in both these countries. And both countries consider India as a friend. So we are in a good position in terms of geopolitically. We have to build up our economy to be able to build up a really powerful military to defend our borders. Another thing I want to say, caution is that even a strong military will not be able to fight, win, and get back our 41,000 square kilometers. That is not going to happen. So at some point in time, when our population is ready, when our politicians are ready, when we as a nation are ready, then possibly a negotiated settlement will happen. Whether China will stay the way it is, the boundaries, or it will implode, all those things are left to speculation. But it is best for India to manage our relations now, not to let any border incident escalate, because we must have a stable, secure geopolitical environment to grow economically. Therefore, you will find that the government has made every effort to assuage China in terms of trade. You will find many concessions given to China. Many things are being still allowed and not put on negative list. And the trade is continuously being given a I just saw a question. Is China able to do things on the land because we are focusing on Navy? No, nothing like that. China is not a maritime neighbor. You must remember. China is way off beyond the Malacca Strait. So it cannot kind of intrude in terms of Navy or Air Force. So it has to be only on the land borders. And we have agreed that we have disputed border. So since we have agreed that we have a disputed border, and the funny thing is that even today, even as I speak, there is no agreement between what is the length of the line of actual control. The LAC held by the Home Ministry and the LAC as defined by the Ministry of Defense are vastly different. The length is different by hundreds of kilometers. So we have to get our act together, grow economically strong, invest more in military modernization, and be able to protect ourselves to allow our growth to sustain over the next few decades. If we are talking about a Viksit Bharat by 2047, like the China is also dreaming of a developed China by 2049 when it completes 100 years of its existence. That also, the last war China fought was in 1979 with Vietnam. I will tell you that also. And it was soundly defeated by Vietnamese army. So China's fighting capability have not been tested on ground. The last war, 62, they may have overrun Arunachal, but in 79 they were thrashed soundly by Vietnam. After that, they never fought a war. But they are modernized. They have the potential. I think I'll end there and open up for questions. We may exceed a little. I hope it is all right, Deepak.
It is fine, sir. No issue. It is very interesting, sir. We are able to know many new things. We have not at all hear about it. So very new things beyond the the books, beyond the the web media. So we have learned a lot of things, sir. But few questions actually people have asked. Like despite we are as a country, we are banning a lot of Chinese product, also not a lot of Chinese app also, and there is a huge trade deficit between India and China. So then, but currently we are talking about India need more trade with China. So one hand we are blocking, and another hand we are talking about more trade with China. So how these things are like?
No. We see the Atmanirbhar Bharat is not a slogan just for the sake of it or for winning votes. In fact, remember, development never wins votes. These other factors. Most of you know who are politically oriented. It takes time. It takes time. We have, in a way, started, kicked off this program in 2016, and the Made in India as a logo. It takes time. The ecosystem has to be built. Now we are as I said, I gave you example of the medical industry only, medicine industry. We are the pharmacy of the world, but we have to get the APIs from China. Now either we shut down these industries, or we get the APIs and built up APIs production in India. Similarly, say mobiles. Now we have started, because of this LIC policy. No, PIL produce, not LIC, PIL, product incentive, PLI, product linked incentive policy. So many industries are being given money by the thing, so that we are able to now started manufacturing mobiles in India. Earlier we didn't. Similarly, in our IT sector, we only produce software. There is no hardware. Now to produce hardware, no economy, no manufacturer produces entire thing by itself. Hundreds of component companies. Even the iPhone, which was manufactured in China, the parts came from 100 different countries. Correct? So to imagine that we will be able to delink from the global, supply chain and build all on our own is not correct. And it's just a question of fact that China dominates that global supply chain. Even the US can't. But that is not to say that we are appeasing China. We have to build up our capability. It has to take hard work. It has to take sustained hard work by every citizen to make the country strong economically. It's only when we become strong economically, then we will be able to, project our power in the neighborhood. Why should Nepal, care much about India's sentiments if it can get millions from China just like that? In the border districts, there are about, I think, 8 border districts of Nepal where every day the ration is being supplied by Chinese. So their loyalty will be towards China. They will give every information. We have not developed our border infrastructure to the extent. And I have been to the foremost positions in Arunachal. We are still in tin shades, and the other side have got, absolutely, what you see I've just come back from a tour of Europe. The British villages, the German villages, the same kind of, beautiful houses with courtyards and streets and everything, just on the border. So they're able to, because they have the money to invest. We don't have that money. We have to work towards that. There is no contradiction here. You have to grow. Even, Deng, when he grew, he said, bide your time. Hide your light, bide your time. Don't show your strength. Stay quiet and grow economically. That they did for 30 years, from 78 to 2008. So we have to also grow economically before we can actually flex our muscles. Gym pehle jana padega. Yeah.
Sir, one more question actually people are asking. Like in many cases, China is backing Pakistan, particularly in terrorism also to counter India's position, whether it may be the global terrorists in UN Security Council when we are asking for global terrorists for Masood Azhar. So in that case also 2 times they have used their veto. And also in the like in NSG or even Security Council, they are blocking our India's position to entry into this important group. So still we are also in the many front, we are conflict with border issue, particularly in Galwan or Dhoklam issue. Still, do you think that this type of issue, still we are not able to. Is it going to hamper the India and China relationship, particularly peace and trade things in future? So this is the
Now we see the to talk about Pakistan. I just saw one question popping up about how important is POK to the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which runs through the Sakgam Valley, through the POK, Gilgit-Baltistan, right up to the Gwadar port in Balochistan. This port will give access, because the road network, the highway network also has pipelines and other things. To be able to, China is dependent on energy from the Middle East, correct? Its economy is completely dependent on energy from Middle East. And that's why Malacca Strait was such an important factor for its growth. Now, the Malacca dilemma can be overcome if they have land routes. That's why both through Pakistan, Gwadar port, as well as Kakchufu in Myanmar, they are trying to have ports alternatives from whereby they can the oil from Middle East can be piped through Myanmar or through Pakistan to China. So the vulnerability of Malacca Strait, Singapore and others are part of the US grouping. So at any time, the straits can be cut off. So there will be a crisis. That is why POK is important.
Okay, sir. One more question. What is
and the other thing is, if you can fight your enemy through a proxy, then why fight directly? So I mean, China is battling Islamists in Xinjiang, correct? Uyghurs.
Yes. Yes.
In Xinjiang, but it is supporting the same Islamists in Pakistan, because here it is directed against India.
Yes.
So that is it's a real politics. That's the real world. It is not about ethics and all. So it will continue to support Pakistan. US is supporting Pakistan. US has supported Pakistan against India in 71. The biggest democracy supporting the dictatorship of Ayub Khan. That is the reality of this world.
Okay. Sir, one more question. Someone has already asked. So what should be India's strategy to protect the chicken neck Siliguri corridor as it has strategic importance for India?
The vulnerability of Siliguri corridor is an issue, but not a major issue. For why, I'll tell you. Firstly, unlike Arunachal, China has accepted this 1975 integration of Sikkim into India. In fact, in 2006, it's actually published maps, which shows in Sikkim as part of India. Unlike the Arunachal Pradesh issue, which the McMahon line and this thing has been put into a question mark now, because India didn't that time accept it. Now they are not even offering it. They have started showing from 2002 onwards. They have started showing Arunachal Pradesh as part of southern Tibet. So the chicken's neck is a narrow corridor, definitely. It has not been developed. We have not looked at Northeast at all. Northeast is highly neglected. I have spent some 6 postings in Northeast. I've flown extensively in Northeast, starting from the militancy of Ulfa and Bodos in 1989 till 2018. So for 30 years, intermittently I have been going there. Commanded a brigade on Nathula. In Nathula brigade, I have commanded myself in 2012. Doklam Plateau is vulnerable. There is no one. The chicken neck is vulnerable, but it's difficult. But we have to strengthen our communications. We have to strengthen our communications. That is why there is a lot of focus on Tripura now. From Agartala, to the link to the port. We are building a national highways, and we are building good train lines and all. Because it's important to have a sea route to northeast. Should this get cut off, so we have to reduce our vulnerability.
Okay, sir. One more question. Someone is asking the string of pearl or the One Belt One Road initiative of China, which is they are developing different port, as you said, in Hambantota in Sri Lanka, or Maldives, Malé, or Gwadar port, and they're trying to encircle India in the Indian Ocean region. So, is it a concern for India? Maybe in future, you told that in Hambantota they have the radars. Whenever the Indian the flight takeoff, they can easily track. So, in future, if the conflict happen and war, some India-China war will happen. So, is it going to help them as they have built the important strategic infrastructure, or should India concern about all this investment in the Indian Ocean region?
No, India has been concerned. This is called the string of pearls.
Well,
But as I said, it's all economy. It's all money. When Sri Lanka was fighting LTT, we did not support it. Now, to pay back China, they gave Hambantota port and the massive airport, which the belt, which is a MTV airport now, and even developed the Colombo harbor. Now they could not pay the debt, so they have given it on long-term lease, 99-year lease. So it's going to be a threat. Gwadar is going to be a threat. Mali is going to be a threat. We are making our effort, but in small ways. Because our the money to spare to invest in this country is only limited. I mean, you tell me one thing. Why have you not connected Sri Lanka with India by a road bridge? We have a massive Tamil diaspora. They are a Buddhist population. And these two countries can be connected by road. Why do you have such bad relations with Sri Lanka? Should we blame Chinese only? So similarly with Nepal, it was a Hindu kingdom till 2008, when the communists took over and made it secular, constitutionally. It was otherwise a Hindu kingdom by constitution. They have a daughter there. We have not been able to overcome. We have bad relations with Nepal. Very testy relations, I would say. Even with Bhutan, with whom we have very close relations, once in a while, Bhutanese Prime Minister goes and starts talking to settle border dispute with, and that is related to Doklam. They have bilateral talks with China to settle the border dispute. After all, you have to have that kind of economic clout to be influential in your neighborhood. When you don't have the economic clout, and you want to fight a country which is actually pairing itself with US, so it will require time, it will require sustained hard work, and it is possible. We are in a good position. As I said, we have the strength of demography and democracy with us. It is possible, but it will take time.
Okay, sir. So people said that India promised, China deliver. So we are always promising that we'll do for these things, that thing, but we are not complete the things in time. But China seriously take all this investment and complete in time. Particularly for that, Nepalese they are more inclined to Chinese side, and so in different neighborhood we have a bad relationship with Maldives, particularly after this issue with Maldives issue, and similarly with Sri Lanka, and all these things. We actually not take our neighborhood very seriously for investment, and we are lagging. As you said, that they are economically much more stronger than India, and they are hugely investment in the neighboring country, and they gain their faith and which is yet is a
I'll tell
challenge.
you one thing. I'll give an economic viewpoint of this, what you said. Uh, as I said, they had 3 trillion surplus. Now it is not because of they are against India that they are doing this. Firstly, I told you Malacca dilemma. The entire their energy route is through Malacca, so they will try to acquire and have ports where their ships can be serviced, supported, protected. So they have gone into Kakchufu, they have gone into Colombo, they have gone to Gwadar, Seychelles. They have established a base. Djibouti, they have established the first military outpost. So they are doing to protect their national interest, their energy routes. In the bargain, we feel surrounded. Well, we are surrounded by enemies. That is the fact. And to fight that, you have to be a strong country. To be a strong country, you have to, again, as I said, build your economic muscles.
Okay. Sir, someone is asking that, so if you give some insight on Indian Air Force and Chinese Air Force, as we have Rafale with us, so can we say that we have an advantage or more powerful than Chinese Air Force?
No, I'll tell you there are 2-3 aspects of this.
Yes.
Okay, a major segment of Chinese Air Force will always be dedicated opposite Taiwan. There's no doubt on that. Air Force to Air Force, so whatever they can deploy. I mean, they may have a large Air Force, almost like 2,000 fighter combat aircraft to about, I think about 500 odd with India. But that's not the correct comparison, because they cannot deploy much out of that 2,000. But there will be two differences. One is that their airfields, the Air Force bases in Tibet, bordering from where they can measure, about 5-6 of them are there. They are not value targets. If you destroy one, it's only in a barren area, there is just a very airfield. Whereas our air bases are all value targets, whether Ambala or Tezpur, wherever, they are all huge, population centers also. Destruction of any of these will already have a massive impact. Fighter to fighter, we are better off. There is no doubt on that. You see, it is not that China can do massive damage because it's militarily strong. It cannot. As I said, we are not firstly maritime neighbors, so it will be very difficult for them to pose a challenge to the Indian Navy. We have advantage there. In terms of Air Force, we have Rafales. They have the J-17s, which are fantastic stealth aircrafts, which are comparable to the Americans' F-22, the J-17s. They are able to invest in massively into technology. They are today technologically comparable because they have, over the last 30 years, 40 years, they have absorbed a lot of technology, and now they are able to contribute. 5G technology, for example. 5G, they are installing 5G equipment in many countries in the world. I mean, we have kept them away. That's one thing, but they're there. So in terms of Air Force to Air Force, we are comparable. Maybe, we have an advantage. There is no doubt. Because our airfields are, remember, at ground level, I mean, nowadays, sea level, so we can take off with maximum load. Their airfields are at high altitude. So they take off all of weight, and therefore the armaments they can carry is limited. It all depends on the air density. I have flown in those areas. In Siachen, in some of the posts, in a particular sortie, we can carry only 1 jerrycan of kerosene. That is the only lifting capability. Just 25 liters. Jerrycan is all you can carry because the air is rare. Similarly, the airfields in Tibet are in a high altitude, 12,000 feet and above. So they can, their lift, all of lift weight is limited, but they can do air-to-air refueling. So their aircrafts can take off from rear areas, and in their own area they can do air-to-air refueling and have a full all-out weight to attack. More important, their missiles. The DF-21 can reach Chennai from Sigasi. 1200 kilometers.
Sir, one more question people are asking. India, China, you told that they are both have the same status. Economically, they are in the similar position one time, like in
Yeah.
1980s. Then
Yeah.
Chinese took off. And do you think that we are following the democracy and we are propagated by the West, the illusion of democracy? Should you think, should we follow the similar type of government like China is following?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because of the economic success of China, it is trying to project that a communist Leninist absolute one party rule uh, is not a bad thing. In fact, because of the faltering of Western economy, firstly in 2008 financial crisis, and now again going into various kind of financial crisis because of its own making, some of it its own making. There is a talk that possibly Chinese model is better, but that's not so. Firstly, the population is psyched or culturally to a particular way of governance. The Chinese have a particular way of functioning throughout their civilization. They were first ruled by Mongols, absolute despots. From 13th to 15th century, from 15th to 20th century, they are ruled by non-Han Manchus. So they have had that kind of a thing. We have had, our Janpads since ancient times. Democracy, even some of our kings, if the king was thought not to be fit, it will be replaced by the Sabha with somebody else. Sometimes some kingdoms imported a king from some other kingdom, because the current chap or the son was not found suitable. So we have been generally democratic, or kind of taking sentiments of the population throughout our culturally we are oriented, and we can grow economically. You see today India, despite being a diverse democratic country with all its flaws, is the fastest economy for the last so many years in the world. Do you need another proof? It is just that we need the right governance and the right policies and commitment of our citizens.
Okay, sir, this is the last question. Can raw or Indian military intelligence play a role to create unrest in China, as it's successful doing in Balochistan to destabilize Pakistan?
Yeah. On the intelligence side, vis-a-vis China, I will admit that having been the head of the China desk in defense intelligence and the inside look through the China deliberations and China focus group, we are on a weak wicket on this. We do not have much human intelligence in China, which is very critical. Technical tech int is something different. You can pick up their aircraft and all that thing, but what exactly happening in their deliberations, we don't get to know. We don't know the mind. It's a very insular country. It's it's a one-party rule. There's a huge party intelligence system, so they're able to control. R&AW, you talk in terms of we are doing our bit in terms of giving support to the Buddhists. We have a government in exile in Dharamsala. So the thing about intelligence community is that it has to be kept under the radar.
Okay.
So a lot of things cannot be discussed.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I understand. Sir, is there any possibilities like we can back to 1950s relationship in India and China?
Yes, very good. No, here, as I said, this Chinese claim is to 38,000 square kilometers of Aksai Chin. They are already physically occupying 36,700, 600 kilometers. So 1,000 kilometers of there, negotiated, it can be stalled at the present level, the LSC also, line of actual control. But can we negotiate? Which country, which political party is prepared to say that we will settle our border dispute with China by ceding this territory. It was never under our occupation to start with, but having psyched our country to believe this is our legitimate claim, now who on what basis can take this step backward? But if you stabilize the relationship, then nothing which is stopping us from developing good relations. We have, I mean, the trade is a kind of an indicator of a good relationship, isn't it?
Yes.
Our trade is growing.
Yes.
How is it growing? Is it because we are forced to? No. It is by choice. We are also exporting almost like some 15, 16, 17 billion to China. We can export more if you produce more. If you can. So going back to the 50s, 60s time is possible, but I cannot foresee it in the immediate future because of the economic asymmetry. In 50s, 60s, 70s, till like 78, we were on same economy. Now there is such gross asymmetry, 6 times large economy. So why should they consider our olive branch positive? Why should they? So we have to manage the relations, stabilize the borders, keep tranquility at the borders. Don't allow their aggressive postures. Their aggression at the borders must be, part of the aggression. Somebody is raising a hand. Yeah. What is the question?
Sushma, you want to speak something? Okay. Okay, I think, sir.
Naxalism. Yeah. Any country will try to create disturbance in your neighbor, in your adversary's country. Naxalism is something which goes back to 60s. I have gone to the village called Naxalbari, where that Sanyal, who spearheaded Naxalism in India, was born. Naxalbari is a village which is between Bagdogra in India and Nepal. It's on that route. Naxalism has taken root because of lack of development and other things. They are actively, they have made converted Nepal into a communist country. So arms are flowing from, and with Nepal we have open borders. So arms are flowing from Nepal, from northeast, and northeast also again Myanmar. The border is leaking. We have an open border with Myanmar, 15 kilometers. People can freely go without any checks. So we have to plug this. And the government is fighting the Naxalites. Naxalite is not a major problem today in terms of economic development. It is being handled. There will always be people who are disaffected with the regime and they can be easily swayed. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So I think we have a long session and it's very interesting and also very insightful session. Someone is asking, sir, the question like we are telling that we can have some agreement to negotiate with Aksai Chin area to China. Similarly, they are claiming for Arunachal Pradesh also in future.
As I said, sorry, what are the question like?
The question is, if you will negotiate with Aksai Chin, similarly they will ask for Arunachal Pradesh also. Should India negotiate on Arunachal Pradesh also?
No, as I said, number of times repeatedly, they have a clear view on Arunachal Pradesh. That is why in 62 they came up to foothills up to Tezpur and went back behind the McMahon lines. They tacitly acknowledge that Arunachal Pradesh is part of India. And in our border agreement of 1993, they say the interest of the settled population will be taken into account. Settled population is mentioned. There is no settled population in Naxal. So Arunachal, they are throwing it because you have not acceded to their pleading all these decades. Let's settle this. So now they're trying to show it. You have to, when you go to a bargain, you have to do it like that. तो 10 रुपया बोलेगा तो तुम बोले 2 रुपया. You also want to pay 8 rupees, but you want him to come down. It's like that. It's a bait more than any real, kind of.
Thank you so much, sir, for this session. It's really an eye-opening session for all of us. जोटा कि आम इंडिया चाइना डिटेल रे आपण माने गोटे प्रॉपर एनालिसिस करी कहले केवल हमर बॉर्डर इश्यू नहीं, पर्टिकुलरली इकोनॉमिक इश्यू को नहीं कि जियो पॉलिटिकल इश्यू को नहीं कि सो डेफिनेटली ऑल एंगल रू आमे एज ए चाइनीज को ओनली एग्रेसिव पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू रू नहीं, इकोनॉमिकली पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू आमे केते इंपोर्टेंट चाइना हम पई सेटा भी आमे रियलाइज कला. आई होप एवरीवन जो माने join करिथिले definitely it is very much helpful to them as a very informative session. Thank you so much, sir, and definitely in future also we'll we'll arrange such type of session जो माने कि पिला माने particularly जो माने interview को जाउछन्ती किबा ऑफिस में प्रिपेयर करूछन्ती, so they will get a completely idea about our relationship with the neighbor. So particularly sir also write one article 25 years of Kargil war. So I read that one, very beautiful article. So sometimes we'll discuss India, Pakistan also, the most the disputed region in the Asia region, and the particularly the fight between India and Pakistan. So as you closely look already work in this area, so definitely we'll have a session with India and Pakistan in the latter times. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, and thank you all जो मैंने join करी and really we enjoy your session, sir.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking, and I hope that the young crowd out there have got some clarity on these issues, and we look forward to more. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Really, it's a
So thank you all. We'll meet in the next class.